Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is going to be fun. I found a new toy. Rummaging around in the shed for some pots, and I found quite a few, so it saved me buying some. Sorry, Mr. White. But yeah, I mean, this will be great to stop anywhere near as much getting in under the kettle, on the floor, under the washing machine, and in my slippers, because that's where the mess usually ends up. So I'm going to have a go at repotting. Essential equipment, rubbing alcohol, and my scissors are being sterilised at the moment. The reason for that is they got used on other orchids this morning. I don't know what I'm going to find at the moment, and I'm pretty certain I'm going to need some of this. Let me explain why. First off, I'm going to get this out. There are some rotten bulbs in here, and there are signs of mould on the media that is completely broken down, although the moss still looks okay, but the rest of it doesn't. So there's going to be some mouldy bits, so any cuts I make on this orchid, I don't really want to start spreading that around or anything else that might be lurking. I'm hoping there's a couple of good bits, but that's not really what this exercise is about. I'll go and get it. That's the one we're doing. They are identical plants, one and the same, and the theory is that in amongst this tangled mess of rotten dead stuff there may be some good bits. That's what I'm after. The majority of this is going straight out under the hedge because it is not viable, and I'm hoping to again get that out of the pot, find some good bits where there's some signs of new growth and some, hopefully some roots somewhere. And when I find how much I've got that's viable, I can make a decision on whether there's any of it worth keeping, and if there is, how much, and then depending on how much, I can then make a decision on what it's going to get potted in. Okay, so first job is to get this thing out. Now I'm hoping it's just going to pull out. The media is, yeah, it's just going to fall apart. I thought it might. This basket was specifically bought for this plant because the slaps on the base are really narrow. So with a layer of chunky bark on the bottom there, I don't need any netting or any additional stuff. If I am going to reuse that, that needs completely sterilising. So it can go in the sink for now, which is where it will get done. I don't expect to find much on here that's any good, quite honestly, but I'm prepared to look. And the first bit I've got a hold of doesn't look that bad. You know, there's a usable piece from there. You don't need this bit. So that bit, it's got a plump bulb, a rhizome, and this growth has happened while it was in that basket. Not exactly a huge amount of root activity, but there is some. So there's something to pot, not just a bare rhizome. So there's a piece there that I can use. Let me hack that. So what I want to end up with is all the rubbish in here, and it can go straight out under the hedge. So we'll take that off there. That's a piece I can use. So that can go in the sink, ready to be cleaned up. Number one. And this bit looks like I might be able to do something with it as well. What I'm just hoping is to get some strands and then have a look and see what I've got. Incredibly long root on there. Is that dead? It is there, but it isn't there. So again, I can shorten that a little bit. I mean, I don't even know where the roots flipping come out on these things. I know so little about Coelogynes. It's well, there's two things I know about Coelogynes in reality I know two things. nothing and bugger all. I really have got some of these and have just failed to do the work and actually find out about them. But that's a usable piece. I'll trim these up later. There's no point in trying to work out how much I want to keep or anything just yet. But there's a piece there that could be planted. I mean, it looks to me like the roots come out just under the base of the bulbs along the rhizome. So potentially there's a place there and a place there where roots can come out. They haven't done yet, but that's been growing in the air. Most of this plant has not been in media. So that'll explain why the roots are poor in places. And a lot of the pseudobulbs have been buried, which is why there's the smell of mushrooms, because there's rotting going on. Probably not. And it's got a tiny new growth there. That's a new growth. I'll put it in with the maybes, because that's all I'm doing. As I said, there's going to be a lot of this that's just got to go. What else we got here? See, there's this entire section here. It's of no use. These are all leafless, shriveled, old pseudobulbs. They're of no use at all, really. You know, in the big bad world of trying to create a reasonable plant, that isn't part of it. That isn't part of it. However, that little, see, there's a side shoot there. Out of all that rubbish, a piece has branched off and grown up into the air. So, but it has got a couple of little roots here. Now these are good roots. They're not long roots, but they're viable. So we'll have that bit off. Complete with that little root on the end. What else have we got then? That's rubbish. As is all of that. Here is that's a reasonable piece. See, that's a relatively new growth. Yes, that's what happens to pseudobulbs when they completely rot off. Yeah, there's a savable piece there. You have to bear in mind, you saw how big that plant was. No blooms. Now, if that had been a happy plant, that should have bloomed, and it hasn't. That's one of the reasons why I'm pulling it apart, because, you know, it hasn't bloomed, and I see no point in keeping a monster like that if it's not going to bloom. It serves no purpose. And there's various bits here. That piece is probably savable. You have that bit. And what else have we got? That bit looks like a That's a side shoot there that wasn't really well attached. If it was, it isn't now. It's a little piece, but it's got a couple of root stubs. It might. And that's a dead root, so that's no, too small. Not worth bothering with. This bit, the bulk of it, no, but the tail end of it, yes. So I'll take that bit back a bit, and we'll see if we can get some roots to grow on that bit. Piece there. I'm ending up with a fair bit in the sink, quite honestly, so I have got some that I can save that will grow on. Again, I mean, that started to grow a couple of new growths on the end, but if you look at the size of the bulbs that have grown in the air, mind, no roots, compared with the bulbs that preceded them, they're quite weak. But nonetheless, it's an extension that's capable of growing. So we can take that back. Not sure what that is. It's a new growth that didn't make it. We'll take that back to behind the first leafless bulb. So that gives me an older bulb with a leaf and two new growths with two leaves on each. So I'm looking for things that can still photosynthesize because they've got leaves. I'm not interested in doing back bulb divisions. What else have we got then? There's a little growth there. Those pseudobulbs are not brilliant, but they've all got leaves. and the latest one on the lead has got quite large leaves. So we'll have that a little bit. And it's got some roots, so yeah. I don't think there's going to be much more. Is that a little bit worth saving? That's all new growth there, apart from the 2 back bulbs, and they're leaved. And it's actually branching, so I'm going to take that back just behind the branch. That gives me 2 leads there, 3 in fact. So that's branched. That's a 3-way split there, and some roots. So we'll have that bit. And I think out of what's in here, that's it. Yeah, I can't see any more. These are just old, you know, they make good back bulbs to try and get some new growths off. I haven't got the space, I haven't got the patience or the time. I just want one plant out of this. Right, that's that one. Let's get this thing out. Now, one of the new growths is poking out of that hole, and I don't think it will go back through, so I'm probably going to lose that. That's the rotten bit. Now let's see what's left, because this bit did actually grow a bit, not much. If I'd watered it a bit more often, it might have been growing quite well by now, but I didn't, and so it isn't. To say, this has just been down on the floor under all the plant shelves, just, can't come out. I'm going to end up tearing the sides of the pseudo bulb off, so you have to come off. Right, now there's another one around there, look, gone through. Well, they won't go through the hole, and I'm not cutting holes in the basket to get it out. Not when I've got this much to play with, it's not worth it. Right, what have we got here then? Nice little basket for something. The media hasn't broken down in here. I obviously used some big bark and put some moss round some of the growths to try and encourage roots, and then promptly decided not to water it very often, so it kept drying out. I'm surprised any of this is alive, quite honestly, the treatment the poor thing's had. Too small. That bit. Well, the fact that that bit's actually got some roots. They're tiny, not worth it. So I'm not going to get anything out of this bit. I don't think I am, quite honestly. No. Okay, that's hedge food. I'll go and dispose of that, get that out of the way, have a good clean up with the pieces I've got, and then we'll have another look through them, because I'll see how much I'm retaining, and at that point I can decide what it's actually going to get potted in. I think there's probably not enough to go back in that basket. It would look a bit sparse. Okay, it will fill it up. And I'll tell you why I don't want to keep such a huge plant. This is a sort of logic. First of all, this has never bloomed for me. One. Number two, the couple of orchid societies I belong to, if ever this plant's going to take an outing for other people to see, it will be like showing a single crocus in a bulb compared with a woodland full of crocuses, because those are the sorts of plants the others are growing. And I asked one guy, when 2 people carried his cristata in, when he brought it in, mass of blooms, I said, how on earth do you grow something that big? And he said, well, firstly, you need 15 years. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. And I said, well, surely you can't have left it in the same media for 15 years. And he said, I planned for this, it's in rock wool. I don't ever need to repot it. So that's how you get a huge specimen plant. You have to plan that far ahead. I don't want a huge specimen plant of this. I want a nice, neat plant that blooms. That's all I'm interested in. I don't want something that takes up a whole shelf on its own. So that's what I'm after. So I'll have a clear up and clean up some bits and bobs and make a decision on what it's going to go in, then we'll have a look at that. I'll be back. Welcome back. That was fun. Not. Okay, all the pieces have had a spray with the hydrogen peroxide. That's what I use because that's all I can get now, but the important bit is the number, 3%. If you go much above that, you start burning things. And I've done so much spraying with my tiny little sprayer, all the hairs on the back of my hand have turned blonde. Yeah. Yes, I am joking. But yeah, take care with hydrogen peroxide, you know, in concentrations it burns. But at that level, 3%, you can give your plant a good going over. And basically, as I said, there was some mouldy bits showing in the media. So there's mould, therefore there's mould spores. And they need being dead, basically. And the H2O2 is the easiest way of achieving that quickly and fast and safe. Always need to be safe. Right, I've been and had a read from my favourite site for coelogynes, which is coelogynes.com, if you want to go and have a look. And there's an article on virtually every coelogyne species. This is the most popularly grown. No, it isn't, because it's a variety. It's not just cristata, it's cristata lemoniana, which apparently is the hybridizer, not the colour. So I'm told. I don't know that for a fact. But anyway, does not like root disturbance. Tough. You've just had some serious stuff. What else? It likes a distinct temperature change between its growing season and the season where it's bordering on resting. But the site says that doesn't mean you have to freeze it, it just means that it needs a good drop, something about 15 degrees centigrade. So it's not a problem if it drops from 30 to 15. It doesn't have to be frozen solid, yeah? So it needs the big change. And during the cool period, it won't be growing much and it won't need huge amounts of water. And some people recommend a total dry rest. The guy on that side says, don't be silly, you will shrivel your pseudobulbs, and then in the growing season, when everything starts kicking off again, it will put all its energy into replenishing the bulbs it's already got, trying to plump them up. And you lose quite a percentage of your growing season as a consequence. So we won't be doing that either. And they also like a shallow root run. They like a well-drained soil, but in the summer months, the monsoon period where they come from, boy do they drink water. So it needs to be moisture retentive, but well-drained. So my theory of not using sphagnum with my Orchiata bark has just gone straight out the window. For this, I'm going to. That's the moss I use. It's just a premium quality New Zealand moss. That's in there getting wet. Good. Chunky bits in the bottom because it doesn't have a deep root run. And I've deliberately got a shallow pot. Yeah, it's much wider than it is deep because what will be in the bottom of the pot wouldn't really get used much. There's not a lot of point. So shallow pot. And this time I'm actually going to add some perlite. I don't normally because it gets algae on it. Now, forget about the dust, it's going to get a good wash in a minute. If I wash it beforehand, I'll get it all over the flipping bit. Cool, you do get some big bits, don't you? This came all the way from the US of A. You can't get it in the United Kingdom. We're not allowed to have it for some reason, we can only have the tiny stuff. But anyway, it's going to get a bit of that in there to just make sure there's some air in round the roots. And then I'm going to fill up all the rest of the air pockets with moss. Contradict yourself in this game so many times, you know. But anyway, I like to break my moss up small, especially when I'm using the smaller grade bark. And the grade of bark I'm using is a mix. It is mostly the smallest grade with some of the medium grade in with it. And again, that's just to make sure it doesn't clag up and that water can drain through. But it won't dry out that quickly because of the moss and the sponge rock. So hopefully this is going to do the job. But I don't like this does not like root disturbance because how the hell else are you supposed to repot the flipping things? And everybody does, so you'll have to put up with it. And the other thing it says is that you should always have at least a bare minimum of 3 pseudobulbs on a division that you take off. It should have a lead, you know, in other words the new growth is at the end, and it should have at least 3 pseudobulbs, preferably 4. And most of the bits I've got the 4. And then it says, because they take an absolute age to kick off, sometimes they can stall for a year before they start growing. Cheers for that. That's just what I needed to know. It pays to cram the pot as full as you can get, because some of your divisions might die. And if you've only got a couple, and one, you know, and there's some deaths, you've got big holes in your pot. So by cramming as much in as possible, if a little bit disappears, hopefully the new bits will fill in the gaps. And the idea is to cram the pot and get a pot full of really squashed up pseudobulbs. And it does say that they grow bulbs on top of bulbs, and they actually like growing like that, so not to worry. I reckon that's enough moss. I can see moss in virtually every section there. And quite honestly, this business of using loads of moss to keep something hydrated, quite honestly, is being damn lazy. If you want to keep something hydrated, water it. And if it dries out in a day, water it again. Yeah? Don't be lazy. I mean, it's like with my mounts. You know, they need to dry fast, things like my Tolumnias. Well, that's down to me. You know, they dry fast and then they need water again the next day. Well, that's my bit. You know. Put them in a pot with loads of flipping sphagnum moss and they take a week to dry out. It won't be long and you'll have no roots left because they rot. Right, let me just rinse my hands because I've got dust all over them. And then we'll see about putting some of these bits in. Now, they're not going to get pressed in. The other thing it says, which I shall have to deal with a little bit later, is that if you don't secure your divisions, it's a recipe for death. So wobbling about is not a good idea. Now what I'm going to do is crisscross, the idea being that new growths are in all different places, if you see what I mean. Yeah, they're not all at one end, you know, they're pointing in different directions. Some will be coming up the middle, some will be near the edge, and I'm going to fill this pot up pretty damn quick at this rate. And the idea is that the rhizomes are sat on or just below the surface, which will encourage the roots, but I'm going to make sure some of the pieces have actually got some roots on, so that there's some hope. This is very slapdash, but it's the only way I can think to do this. Now that's what I'd call a potful. So we've actually got 2 potfuls, which means I'm going to have to do another one now. And then the idea is to just tease this in loosely, bearing in mind I've got hardly any roots. So it's not like I'm trying to make sure the roots are down in the compost, because there ain't none, or hardly any. The idea is to just fill in the gaps, so that the pseudobulbs are not buried, but the rhizomes are in or just below the surface. And when I water, this will settle down in between those bulbs and around those rhizomes, and the roots will kick off and it'll be wonderful. That's the wishful thinking bit. But it does pay when you're doing something you haven't done before to go and have a quick look before you blurt into it. I'm glad I went and had a look about you know, the type of media. I now know that this, if some roots push out, I will see signs of new growth, and when I do, it's going to need a lot of water. These are thirsty little creatures and they drink in the growing season. They come from quite high up in places like northern India. The quite high up is a bit of a giveaway. But the site I've just looked at and cross-referenced said that the fact it comes from high up does not mean it has to be grown cool. That's just how it grows in the wild. If you want to grow it warm, that's fine. But if you do, it will drink water like it's going out of fashion. So you cannot keep them warm if you don't hydrate them in their growing season. They need that hydration, and they need pretty good humidity to go with it, or they start drying off, the root tips will go brown, and all sorts of wonderful things like that will happen, none of which you want. So that's it. That's what it's going to get. I'll do my normal settling process. This is Roger's patented method of settling the compost. That's it. And then that's going to get a good soak, which will settle everything even more by pouring water all over that. Now, just having a quick look. Rhizomes are in contact, missed a bit there. That rhizome's in the air, and that was the problem in the last basket. So I don't want to go and do it again, do I? I need rhizomes in contact, and then if they push out roots at those joints, they go straight into media. Yep, I'm happy with that. No, I'm not. Missed a bit again. There's a new bit on the end there, dangling in the air. Just needs a bit in underneath it. There we go, that's one. Okay, the other one's going to be a repeat of that process, so I'm not going to film that. I'm going to wind that up there. So that is Coelogyne cristata variety Lemoniana, which has a slightly paler yellow in the lip. The flowers, however, are the same size. They are just as big, they are just as wonderful, and I'll let you know how wonderful they are probably about February next year. I haven't got anything else I can cross that you can see, but yeah, let's hope we get something going now, because this was just a waste of space as it was, so let's give it a chance. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. That's not the only way to repot a Coelogyne, that's just how I've done it. You know, given what I had, the pieces I had, and the fact that I didn't really have a single plant to repot, I had lots of bits and pieces all over the place, a lot of which were going mouldy and rotten and had to be removed. And this is the good bits that's left. That doesn't mean every bit of that's going to live. I still might actually lose some of those pieces. But that's as good a chance as I can give it. Now that's going to get a good soak, and then it's going to go on the lowest shelf I've got, which at the moment is cool. And let me see if I can show you. On some of these pieces, there's already signs of the next growth to come. Wouldn't it be nice if it's a flower spike, but it's not. It's going to be the next pseudo bulb. And quite a few of these leads had these little pieces. It's a good sign. That gives me hope. And I've got enough there for another pot full, the same as that. Nearly as full, but not quite. So there we go, two nice potfuls of Coelogyne cristata variety Lemoniana, with the best possible chance I can give those to take off. If they both take off like rockets and grow really well this year, by the end of this year these pots will not have a lot of space left in them. Will I keep both? Probably not. I'll keep the best one. That's if there is a best one, of course. We could have two potfuls of dead pseudo bulbs, but we'll wait and see. So say these grow very high up in their natural environment, so they are used to quite cool temperatures and obviously very fresh air. They don't get a lot of light, because even you know, even when the leaves aren't on the trees in those areas, there's lots of fog and mist and stuff, so they don't really like too much direct light on them. But you know, I'm just going to keep these in a medium light, more like oncidium or a bit less, something like that. And they'll stay in a cooler part, you know, where they get plenty of fresh air. They'll probably go on the shelf directly in front of the inlet fan, quite honestly, once I get that thing going. And that way they will get the coolest air I can provide every time that fan comes on. And when it's not on, they'll be in the coolest part. And I mean, I've got air circulation in all parts. It's just that bit will be a bit intense with that new fan I've got. So there we go. Let's hope they take off. I've done the best I can for them. And As I said, the mouldy elements and things from the old media should have been cleaned up with the hydrogen peroxide, so they should get off to a good start. But not a lot of roots, and hopefully they will now push some out. Recommendations are, if you're going to break bits off or repot these beasties, do it at the start of the growing season and give them the maximum chance to do well in that growing season before they need to dry out a bit in the winter. I mean, I won't be drying mine out totally in the winter because I don't think that's recommended. Some do it, but I won't be. But they'll get a natural reduction in water because they won't be using as much, because they won't be growing. So they'll get that form of winter rest. You know, a bit like my Nobiles. They only get as much water as they need, but they don't get it stopped altogether. So there we go, and all that on less than half a glass of wine. So that needs topping up. Those need watering. See you next time. Bye for now.